Now let's start with the makeup of Theresa May's new cabinet, which seems to have left the East Midlands with a weaker hand at the top table. Going into the reshuffle, we had 4 politicians with a regular seat in the cabinet, but that soon changed. The first victim was Loughborough's Nicky Morgan, discarded from her role as Education Secretary. Baroness Stoll of Beeston, who was leader of the House of Lords, was also dropped. Derbyshire Dale's Patrick McLaughlin, who was Transport Secretary, was moved to Conservative Party Chairman. And the Broxtowe MP, Anna Soubry, has resigned from her role as Business Minister, leaving just Patrick McLaughlin to represent us at Cabinet level. And some breaking news this morning. The Melton and Rutland MP, Sir Alan Duncan, has been made a Minister in the Foreign Office, and Heather Wheeler and Mark Spencer have joined the Whip's office as Assistant Whips. Ken Clarke, some big names cast aside there. It means we have one person, one MP from the East Midlands around the Cabinet table. We have one shadow member of the Cabinet as well. We've lost quite a lot of influence. Does this matter?
Well, I mean, the regional thing obviously just happens, but there are people there. There's Patrick there, and I'm delighted to hear that Heather and Mark Spencer have just had their first step up. So, the East Midlands are still going to be very much there. Personally, I am rather shocked that Nicky and Anna Soubry have gone. I mean, this isn't just sort of geographical loyalty. I happen to know both of them well. I'm a great fan of both of them. They're extremely good ministers, I think. But in my experience, whenever any Prime Minister has to do a reshuffle, which is a dreadful job, there's nobody else agrees entirely with what they do. And Theresa is certainly her own woman. She knows exactly who she wants. Some people, she wants, and some people apparently, at the moment, she doesn't. And but I personally am rather shocked to see Nick and Anna go. I hope they both remain very active in politics, and like Alan Duncan, in due course, they'll be able to come back and resume their ministerial careers.
John Mann, you were a Leave campaigner. Only 6 members of the Cabinet now are Brexiteers. Are you happy with that proportion?
Well, it's an explosive cocktail in the Cabinet. I think I'd call it a Bucky's delight. Which one's going to resign first or be sacked first? I would have had a combination like they have. Whether those personalities will be the one, time will tell. It's a fairly bold and high-risk strategy.
Do you think those big personalities, Boris Johnson, Liam Fox and David Davis, are going to gel together?
Well, if they don't, then they're going to be out one way or other. I do suspect at some stage someone's going to walk, going off a huff because they're not getting their way. There are some fundamental clashes. If I was Theresa May, I'd be thinking, how can I draw in the rest of Parliament, be it experienced backbenchers like Ken, be it Labour politicians, or whatever view on the referendum, because there's going to need to be sufficient a consensus on how we move forward if we're going to have a strong negotiating hand. And that's going to be very difficult for her to do.
Ken Clarke, you famously described Theresa May as a bloody difficult woman. Were you surprised by how ruthless this reshuffle was?
No, but I think she has to be ruthless because she's got to take over as Prime Minister at a terribly difficult time. And that leak, as it were, when someone switched a mic on when I was chatting to Malcolm, I did go on and say she was good, and I got on with her all right, and I compared with Margaret Thatcher. And she's different. What I like about Theresa is she's her own woman. I mean, nobody, I think, knows her very well. She's not interested in sound bites. She's not interested in public relations. She'll do the photo opportunities, but not daily. And she's formed her own government pretty ruthlessly. We need a tough woman who's more concerned with content and a bit less with public relations at the moment.
Ken Clarke and John Mann for the moment. Thank you. Well, things becoming a little clearer at the top of the Conservative Party then, but Labour, of course, facing a summer of bitter arguments over its future direction and its leadership. Our political editor, Tony Rowe, has been looking at the state of the 2 main parties here in the East Midlands.
For me, when Jeremy Corbyn leapt onto this wall 11 months ago to talk to crowds with a megaphone, it was clear he could win. Now he's got to try to do it again. And even today, the papers have stories about Labour's divisions getting worse. It says here, anti-Corbyn leadership rivals are now turning on each other.
Last August was a sign of what was to come. Hundreds couldn't get into the Corbyn rally in Nottingham. One of those sharing a platform with him that day was a law student who will now be campaigning for him again.
It's definitely not a call to personality. It's not just about Jeremy Corbyn. It's entirely about his politics and what he represents. And I reject the idea that, you know, if Jeremy Corbyn falls, this movement will fall. This movement is here to stay, and we're going to try and affect change in society and bring about a more equal and better world.
On the other side of the Labour argument is Georgia Power. Hers is the first name on a petition drawn up at the start of the coup of over 100 Labour members in the East Midlands calling for Jeremy Corbyn to step down.
I think we've tried. We did try hard, and I think, you know, we respected the fact that he had a large amount of the party's votes, but it's clear now that is it 172 Labour MPs can no longer support him, and I don't think that's a workable situation. I think the leader of the party needs to have the support of the Parliamentary Labour Party.
2 young Labour members, one for Corbyn, one anyone but. They both agree, though, the abuse and the threats between so-called supporters has to stop.
It's wrong to paint a narrative that it's just factions of the left who are engaging in abuse. I've received a lot of abuse from my fellow party members on the right. Jeremy Corbyn has himself received death threats, which he revealed not long ago. So I think it's wrong to paint it as just coming from one side. It's toxic in politics, and it needs to be driven out from all sides.
We need to make sure that we're working together to respect MPs of all sides, and there's no doubt in that MPs, whether it be from Jeremy Corbyn to someone on the other side of the party, need to be working together and need to be showing that respect.
While Labour fight in the open, Conservative divisions over who leads them were settled swiftly. You can't find many places more Tory grassroots than Melton Mowbray in Leicestershire. Members thought, of course, they were going to have a say in who their next leader was.
Most of the members absolutely understand it is in the national interest, and I think as it's played out now, we have a new Prime Minister, a new Cabinet, and a strong direction of where this government would like to go.
With Theresa May saying the Tories would make Britain work not for a privileged few, but for everyone, something Ed Miliband used to say, does that not alarm activists?
What Theresa May is saying is that blue-collar conservatism is very much alive and well, and we are the party of the ladder, where if you want opportunity, if you want to set your business up, if you want to take a risk, then we'll help you, we'll be on your side.
And this morning's papers make it clear, something we already know in the East Midlands, that socially liberal MPs like Nicky Morgan and Anna Soubry will be holding their own government to account on those issues.
Well, plenty to talk about there. Let's start with you, John, about the state of the Labour Party. Jeremy Corbyn is going to be on the leadership ballot, as we all know. Do you stand by your published assessment of him, that he's not remotely up to the job of leading the Labour Party back to power?
Well, that's what the voters are telling me, my voters, and that's what the opinion polls are saying as well. But I listen to what my voters say because I knock on their doors. I've got a huge team out at this very moment, and they'll feed back what they're getting. But so I fear that come an election he will disintegrate. But why aren't the so-called big beasts stepping up and challenging?
Well, why don't you step up, John?
Well, I wouldn't get the nominations. I think probably get 5 or 6. I might get, and you know, in a good week, perhaps it'll be a good week, I might get 15, but you need 51. But where's Tom Watson? Where's Hilary Benn? Where's Yvette Cooper?
Dan Jarvis?
Where's Dan Jarvis? They should be standing now, not hiding back.
Why are they? Why aren't they coming forward?
Well,
what's holding them back?
A good question. They all say that it's time to save the Labour Party. They should step up to the mark and stand one of them. Right. And then there can be a proper contest. Whoever wins will win. We can get that behind that person. And if they win elections, big elections, including in this region, the county elections next year, let's see if the results are good. Whoever's the leader, we'll be cheering them on.
But Angela Eagle and Owen Smith have stepped up to the mark. Are you convinced by any of them? Either of them?
Angela's been around a long time. She's not had a woman for a long time. Like everyone else, this Owen Smith chap, you know, who is he? He's been pretty quiet, shall we say. And certainly, the idea that Labour's going to be arguing for a referendum within 18 months, total nonsense. It's frankly, it's insulting to Labour voters, it's insulting to the country. But it actually totally misses where we are in politics and what's needed. Actually, what either side you're on the referendum, of how we need to be negotiating effectively for the best deal for Britain.
So that suggestion by Owen Smith that he mentioned this morning, you dismiss. Do you share that as well, Ken Clarke?
Well, I actually genuinely, first of all, want a strong Labour Party. I mean, I really do, because I think we need a proper opposition. It will help our lot actually perform better by holding us properly to account. David Miliband failed to step up, which I think was one of the big disasters for the Labour Party a few years ago, so it's very reminiscent of that. Both parties are very wide coalitions. We wouldn't be in one party if we had a PR electoral system like the continent, so you always have difficulty holding together. The difference is our lot have learnt the lesson of Maastricht, so we're all trying to be terribly friendly to each other again, and we understand that this broad coalition's got to work. Some of their hard left strike me as nasty as they were in the 1970s, so they really got to get hold of it, not just change Jeremy, he's a nice chap, but actually stop the kind of thing that's going on in the Labour movement.
You've got your hard right in your party.
Yeah, but they don't start trying to deselect people and make threatening phone calls and throw bricks through windows and that kind of thing.
But I mean, you've been in Parliament...
Not yet.
...for 46 years. You've seen the Labour Party rip itself apart before in the past. Have you seen anything quite like this?
Yeah, I have, because I think it did this in the late 70s and early 80s, which is why we wound up with the Social Democrats and the breakaway.
Are we there
and all
again?
That.
Are we in the same circles?
They're in danger of it.
Do you think we could see a split?
But from outside, I suspect people like John will do their best to get a sensible outcome without doing that.
John, do you think a split is imminent?
No, I don't think there's a split. And one of the reasons is that at some stage people will calm down and they'll wonder why there are only a handful of us who, when we argued to leave the European Union, were, for better or for worse, in tune with the vast majority of Labour voters in the north. That question and what should be done about it is one of the big issues in British politics and the biggest issue by far for the Labour Party.
So how do you reconnect with those core Labour supporters that you said the Labour leadership during the referendum just had no idea what they were thinking?
No, but the offer that we give to many young people in my area and in the north of England is turn up for work, 0-hour contracts, agency work, you don't know if you're going to be working or not that day. That's not good enough. That's the fundamental flaw line in British society, the big divide. The Labour Party needs to be listening to those voters and understanding and have a coherent policy in relation to immigration and the European Union, and we haven't done for quite some time.
But Jeremy Corbyn says, he has huge support amongst the party leadership. Do you really think that your party will become unelectable if he is re-elected as?
Well, what's really worrying for those who want to have a strong Labour Party is that the new members who are joining are virtually exclusively from the middle classes. We're not getting people joining from the working classes, and if there was one change he should be demanding in this election, let those 3 million trade unionists who are affiliated to the Labour Party have a vote, because only about 60,000 of them voted in the last leadership election out of 3 million. The reason he won't do that is he's fearful that those people wouldn't vote for him.
John Mann and Ken Clarke for the moment, thank you. Well, let's move on and away from the party battles, and an East Midlands police force has become the first in the country to categorise sexual harassment in the street as a hate crime. Nottinghamshire Police says it'll investigate incidents in which women feel threatened, including allegations of sexist comments or wolf whistling. As Helen McCulloch found out, it's a move that's been welcomed.
There aren't many women who can say they've never experienced street harassment.
I've been shouted at a couple of times on the street and stuff, and it's not very nice. It's really derogatory to women.
I don't like catcalling and stuff like that. I have quite a strong opinion on it. I don't like it. But it makes me feel uncomfortable. That's why I don't like it. It makes me feel awkward.
Some kind of people, how they approach you, makes you feel like you can't really say anything to them. It's quite intimidating at times.
Even our own reporters aren't immune. East Midlands Today's Sarah Teal faced abuse whilst reporting on an anti-street harassment conference last year.
Yeah, like that.
The anti-street harassment group Hollaback found that most women had their first experience of catcalling at around the age of 11 or 12. Nottinghamshire Police gained international attention this week when they announced on Wednesday they will become the first police force in the country to recognise street harassment as a misogynistic hate crime. Nottinghamshire police have dismissed claims that this is simply about wolf whistling, saying they've heard first-hand experiences from women in this city who have been grabbed, groped and shouted at for doing no more than simply walking down the street. They say they will no longer tolerate this behaviour, no more than they would racist or homophobic abuse.
This is about when women face unacceptable, concerted, often physical assault, unwanted approaches to them that can be incredibly distressing, that really affects their quality of life and in some severe cases not just their physical health but their mental health as well.
The move came after close work between the police and the Nottingham Women's Centre, which first raised the issue.
It's all about giving women the confidence to report the things that they suffer on a day-to-day basis and know that they will be believed and that it will be dealt with. It's about reducing the risk to women in the community, trying to disrupt activities before they become more serious. This doesn't actually change any laws, so these things that were crimes before are crimes still afterwards. It doesn't put anything new in place, but what it does is say that the police take this stuff really seriously.
The police hope raising the profile of the crime will encourage more women to report incidents, giving them the ammunition they need to stamp down on something that blights many women's lives.
Ken Clarke is a former Home Secretary and a former Justice Secretary. This sort of thing would have come across your desk. What do you make of this decision?
Well, I was rather reassured by your piece, actually, because, of course, I'd read in the newspapers that we were going to make wolf whistling a hate crime. Now, I've never wolf whistled at a girl in my life, and I think, it's a pretty antisocial thing to do, but it rather debases hate crime if you do that. But sexual harassment, the kind of thing that's been described, that's fine. I mean, suddenly the whole culture has changed for the better, and we're no longer taking the same view that people did take 20, 30 years ago about the casual abuse of women. I hope they can do something about social media and women, where things seem to be very bad indeed.
I'm John Mann. The police complain about being overstretched all the time. Realistically, do you think they can pursue these claims?
Well, I'd say well done to the Police Commissioner Paddy Tipping and Nottinghamshire Police for being the first to take this issue really seriously. Are there going to be enough police officers around to do anything about it? I've not seen too many in my area over recent years. So let's also see Theresa May handing more money for police, and then we can actually do something about it.
Well, we'll see. Talking of the future, let's look ahead to the future. I mean, it's the summer recess, but I would imagine behind the scenes a lot of work is going on in terms of laying the groundwork for Brexit. David Davis, the new Brexit Secretary of State, has said that he expects the negotiations or Article 50 to be triggered by the beginning of next year. Do you think that is too soon, Ken Clarke?
I think we've got to start as soon as we can, because the economic outlook's very worrying. I mean, at the moment we've got Mark Carney in charge of the shop, trying to stabilise the markets and so on. I think the risk of a recession in the near future is quite real. So the sooner the better. But of course the problem is no two Brexiteers agree with each other about what they mean by leaving. So I'm glad we've got a government so quickly. I'm glad we've not messing about for 9 weeks for a leadership election going on. They've got to get together and get down to the nitty-gritty.
So you're happy for Article 50 to be triggered fairly quickly, are you?
I think we need to start the negotiations fairly quickly, because we need to know what are our trade and economic relationships going to be with our biggest market.
And yet when we trigger Article 50, we can only actually discuss constitutional and legal arrangements, is my understanding. John, are you satisfied? Are you happy that it's going to start in the beginning of next year?
Yes, I am. Don't forget the momentum that led to the vote here is also going on in other European countries, and the Eurozone as an economy is in bigger problems than we are. And the Italian banks and the French exposure to the Italian banks is probably the single biggest issue that's affecting the European economy at the moment. So we need to get into that. For me, I'm very happy for trade relations. I'm very happy for students and skilled people to be moving freely. The question, and if you like the bottom line, is about unskilled labour and that immigration into the country and indeed into other countries. That is the one that is the big issue in my area, I think it's the big one that's the big issue across the East Midlands.
We've only got less than a minute to go, so there's a quick question to you both, and it's been speculated about a possible spring election sprung by Theresa May. What are your views on that, Ken Clark?
No, they're absolute disaster. To call an election because you haven't decided what you want to do would just lead to a rather farcical outcome. I wasn't impressed by the referendum campaign. Heaven knows what would happen in an election in this atmosphere.
And in Labour, it's the last thing they want, isn't it, John?
Well, it would be, it's probably not too good for Labour, but it would be bad for the country at the moment. Normally you'd say, yeah, let's get this lot out, we're in opposition. At the moment, that would be bad for the country. And we've got to actually be thinking of the country. I will not be supporting a vote to have an early election. It would be very bad for the country. I'd rather we can hold this government to account on health and the rest and use Parliament to do it.
John Mann, thank you.